Welcome to Film Strip, movie reviews presented by Continuous Play Podcast. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Kurt.
And this is our review of Lolita, starring James Mason, Shelley Winters, Sue Lyon, Peter Sellers, directed by Stanley Kubrick, released in 1962 in a budget of $2 million, grossed $9.25 million at the box office. So we finally come back to our Kubrick retrospective here, Kurt, near the end of the year. We're working through this, and coming off of Spartacus, Kubrick wanted to do something much, much smaller in scale. I think we talked about last time how he was unhappy with how a lot of that was out of his control and stuff. So he chooses a controversial novel written by a Russian American in 1955 about an older man who becomes sexually involved with a girl after he becomes her stepfather.
He sure does.
Why?
Well, I can't say. I'm not sure as to why. Maybe this is just the start of Kubrick getting into a mix of, eventually he'll be doing stuff that's about, being as visually interesting as possible. But now, of course, is where he starts to get into controversial material and stuff that's maybe politically relevant, or stuff talking about the culture, or not just making, kind of like something like The Killing. Really, anyone could have made something like that. But something like Lolita, you kind of got to have a feel for it. You gotta really know what you're doing. You really got to want to make this movie.
Oh, I agree. And I think you've hit on something. I mean, this is a string of things that are going to push the envelope a little bit. I mean, you've got Dr. Strangelove coming up next. That's definitely a political statement. 2001 Space Odyssey, we'll get to talk about that when we get to that one and what that is. But A Clockwork Orange has certainly got a statement to it. And then we get into, then it's Barry Lyndon, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. So, which I don't know what the statement of that last one is. We'll get to that one eventually.
Yeah.
So, but we're here with Lolita at this point, and I gotta say, man, like I was aware that Kubrick had made this film. I had never seen it before we did this. I had seen part of the remake they did with Dominique Swain and Jeremy Irons, though, and I didn't ever watch all of it because it was just really unsettling, and I just couldn't go for it because the way it presented things, it just left a weird taste in my mouth. So going into this one, like I knew already, I'm turned off by the subject matter to begin with, but much like it was with the Devil's Rejects review that we just released, I didn't really like that movie at all, and I didn't like the premise of it, and I didn't like a lot of what was in it, but I watched it again, and throughout the review and the discussion with Ron and Aaron from Generation Y, was able to find like what Rob Zombie was trying to do, what he was trying to say. And we're going to do the plot summary in a minute, but that's going to be my first question to you is, what is it Stanley Kubrick is trying to say about these characters and these people? Because there's no one here that I would call like the audience is in for this. There's no like protagonist to root for. You can't root for the main character, can you, without feeling just really scummy?
Lolita was the last remaining Kubrick film it was the last one I hadn't seen yet, and for some reason, despite being a fan of his, I never bothered to watch it, even after buying this big Kubrick Blu-ray set that had everything from 1962 onward. And I knew it was about a book about an older man and a teenage girl, and that, James Mason, Peter Sellers was in it. That's really all I knew. I didn't expect that much from the movie. I had my own ideas about what maybe the plot might be, For instance, I thought it was going to be a totally straight drama. And I thought maybe it was going to be about like an amorous teenage girl attracted to James Mason. I never would have thought it was a movie about the other way around at all. And then the movie starts, and we'll get into it, but I'll just say I had no idea what kind of movie this would actually be, because I was disgusted, I was disturbed, but I could not stop laughing for the most part, and that combo made this experience all the more twisted. Like, I thought I had seen the most twisted and perverted movies ever made, and I think I was incorrect.
And that's funny that we'll talk about the lack of what you would consider to be edgy material here, but just the dialogue and the scenery and the way that these characters interact with each other and what we're told happens and things is so much more disturbing, I think, than even something like The Devil's Rejects, where Rob Zombie just shows you somebody sticking a gun in a guy sticking a gun in a woman's, crotch and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like that, that is evocative and gives you this, real shock, and it was supposed to, obviously. But this movie goes about it in a much more subversive way. And I think this is some of Kubrick really trying to kick back at the establishment in Hollywood or movies or whatever that wanted him to be a certain thing. I got that immediately, that he picked something as out there as he possibly could, and wow, the results. So I guess before we get any further into it, though, Kurt, I wonder how much of our audience has seen this one. I imagine they're probably aware of it, but I wonder how many of them have actually gone down the road with it. Give everybody a plot summary. Tell us what happens in Lolita, and let's do beyond the normal. Let's give everybody as much detail as we can, because I don't think we can walk through this movie piece by piece. We really just got to talk about these characters and themes.
Pretty much. So here we go. So spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, there is the very first scene actually is kind of maybe the biggest spoiler, but here's Lolita. Professor Humbert is spending the summer with a widow and her teenage daughter before he starts a teaching position at a university. During his stay, his landlord becomes infatuated with him while he becomes infatuated with her daughter, Lolita. Lolita is sent away for summer camp, and when it seems like Humbert might not see Lolita again, he marries the landlord to get closer to Lolita. The landlord discovers Humbert's perversity and after they're married, and in a fit of confusion and rage, stumbles outside in the rain and is struck and killed by a car.
Are you sure you're not talking about The Devil's Rejects? Because a lot of this happens in The Devil's Rejects. I just want to say.
I'm sure Zombie's a Kubrick fan.
That's what it is, yeah.
And Humbert tracks Lolita down, does not tell her her mother is dead, but it decides instead to take her out for a romantic getaway in the mountains. While at the hotel, Humbert is met by this guy, Quilty, pretending to be a cop, asking him about him and Lolita. And after finally confessing that Lolita's mother is dead, we jump forward a few months in time where him and Lolita are actually in an involved relationship under the pretense that they are just stepfather and stepdaughter. When Humbert is concerned that their secret might be outed, he tries to take Lolita to Mexico, where he thinks they'll be free. Lolita becomes ill, has to stay in a hospital en route to Mexico, and when Humbert arrives to get her so that they can leave, he is told her uncle already got her. And then we jump forward a few years ahead to find out Lolita is married, pregnant, wants nothing more to do with Humbert, and she explains that Quilty, the man Humbert's been encountering throughout the movie, is the one who took Lolita from the hospital and was in fact another pedophile who just wanted to have her, but then later abandoned her when he was done with her. Humbert signs over everything he has to Lolita, tracks down Quilty, and murders him in his home, which is actually the first scene in the film.
Wow, so lots of twists and turns, and the good old Kubrick time jumps in there. Like you say, it ends with the beginning, or the beginning is the end, however you want to put that. But in the middle of it, what we have is the story of a pedophile French professor who falls in love with a girl, marries her mother so he can be close to her. Mother finds out about it, dies in kind of a rage, suicide, tragic death, whatever. And then he ends up losing her anyway to what I can only say Peter Sellers has got to be doing like a terrible Sigmund Freud like riff or something as Quilty, because it's like everything you think of with Freud, but it's Peter Sellers. And I'm just sitting there going like, what a bizarre film, because again, the only person you really can feel for this is Lolita. And while she does things that it makes you, the film wants you to say, well, see, look, like she wants it. But really, she can't want it. She's a kid. She doesn't know what she's doing. And I guess you're glad in the end, or I was at least, that she had moved on from these wackos, and you hope that she could have some bit of a normal life. But boy, the sordid things that happened in between, Kurt, wow.
It's It's unbelievable. I saw a random YouTube comment, and it kind of sums up what this movie is. Lolita is an unfilmable film.
Yeah. And I think that's even what the original trailers were in 62. Was like, how did they make Lolita? Because the reputation of this book was everywhere at that point. And I'm with you. I mean, Kubrick sometimes just like he'll find a book and he just gets obsessed with it and he wants to do it. And there's legendary stories about stuff he gets obsessed about and won't let go of for years. Napoleon's a great, that's one of the probably the more famous ones. But I think this rattled around in his head somewhere and he just couldn't let it go. And I got to tell you, as disturbing as that is to me, if I had picked up a book like this and just read it just to see what it was, I could see how this wouldn't get out of my head. Like, we've both watched this movie a while ago, and it's been rattling around in my head a long time. And I'm kind of glad to have this podcast to get it out of my head because I don't know that I want it in there anymore. Exactly.
Like, second we're done recording, I can breathe a sigh of relief. Okay, don't have to think about that anymore.
Right, your disc is now a coaster, I hope, because holy
there
cow,
you go.
I hope you never watch this again. I mean, if we're not tipping our hand already to the end, folks, well, we'll do like this movie does. We'll just go ahead and tell you. But now let's get into what happens. And I guess we got to talk about Humbert, our main character here, James Mason. And, I mean, gosh, I mean, a fantastic actor, right? I mean, North by Northwest, and he was in Julius Caesar, and just all kinds of stuff, right? He was even in Salem's Lot, if you remember that thing. But to watch him in this, it's such a different performance. It's a hard. I would imagine it would be a very hard character to play. And I gotta say, he does a pretty good job with it. But at no point does he do anything to convince me that I should be on his side.
Oh yeah, no way. I don't think Kubrick wants us to be on his side either. It's weird. Yeah, James Mason, like at that point in his career, was doing very well, and I'm shocked he said yes to this. Not because of I'm shocked anyone would say yes to this.
True.
Because it's just like no matter he saves it by delivering such a good performance and playing it. He plays it a couple different ways. He plays it where it's kind of funny. He plays it where it's sad. He plays it where it's out and out, like a couple of moments where he plays it where it's absolutely frightening and where the monster he is does come to the forefront. But it's a bizarre. It's a great performance, but it's such a bizarre performance.
Can I tell you my theory on it is they got James Mason, and I guess Kubrick, I don't know how he convinced him to do it. I mean, who knows? That story seems to be lost to time. But the thing that gets me about it, and I've read several critics that said this, is that, and I haven't read the book and I don't intend to, but that the character in the book is not likable at all. Like, you have no likability to the guy. Like, he comes off as skeezy as his actions are. But that Mason gives this guy a genuine likability so that the audience just doesn't hate him for what he's doing. Like, you're supposed to get behind him on some level. Maybe you don't agree with what he's doing, but you don't hate the person as much as he's not vicious or violent about his obsession with this girl and really with young girls all around, because that's the thing in the book is this guy is obsessed with these, what does he call them, nymphettes or whatever, these, pubescent or prepubescent, right on the edge of puberty teenage girls the whole time. And it's exploring pedophilia like that is, generally when we think of pedophilia, we often think of it as same sexuality. I mean, that's a lot of the true crime version of it, at least, right?
Sure.
But to explore it as heterosexuality, as if you would any kind of romance, because the way this movie plays off is like a rom-com, which is the weirdest thing ever. It's like the most disturbing rom-com ever made, but it plays off some of those same elements, and that's what makes this so strange. And I can only think that's what Kubrick saw as the challenge. I mean, how on earth could he convince MGM to put this thing out other than it's going to get so much talk about, people are going to go see it just to see how in the world we did it, right?
Oh yeah, that's one of the things that makes me like this movie so much is that it's a horror show. It's a disturbing a movie like the same way that the movie like the Danish film The Hunt is another movie that deals with pedophilia, or you can even just go flat out and go for Silence of the Lambs, dealing with murder, that kind of just disturbing nature. Is that it is that, but it's not formatted like that. It doesn't play like that. Is that that's a thing about the way James Mason play this and the way Kubrick plays James Mason is, I believe I read something there that Kubrick made a conscious decision to not ever have a moment where James Mason explains himself or explains why he's attracted to this girl or defend why he's attracted to this girl. It's just like every all the best villains are the heroes of their own story. So the last thing this guy is thinking is that he's doing anything wrong. He's just, again, it does play like a romance movie, like a romantic film. So it's so casual how he thinks that this is so okay what he's doing, and that just makes it even worse. It makes it so much more disturbing than if he was like drooling over her, or like had pictures of her over the wall like some kind of a serial killer. Just he plays this like as though it was someone his own age, or as though he was her age, or he plays it so casually. But it makes me queasy when I think of this movie.
No, I'm with you. I mean, it certainly does feel that way. And we have to shift over now to our titular star, Sue Lyon, as Dolores Lolita Hayes here. Now, from the book, they raised her age up 2 years. She's supposed to be 12 in the book. She's 14 in the story, and that was her age at the time. And there's no easy way to say this. They chose her because she was more well-developed than the other 14-year-olds they tried out for the part. And that's just pretty much it. And that's disturbing that and you can imagine it, a group of men, sitting around going, doesn't look enough, get another one. I mean, you can see it. And and I mean, and in light of recent news coming out of Hollywood, it just makes that even more disgusting. But she was praised for her role here, if not become typecast, because she played it again in Night of the Iguana, and which I think is a fabulous film. It's a much better film than this, and it kind of disappeared, after the 70s. Like, didn't really do much. Had a lot of, personal problems and things like that, but really hasn't been active since the early 80s. But boy, what a splash to make in your first role, to come off of and play in one of these controversial roles like this. It's almost, you feel bad for her as an actress, though, because how do you ever top that? I mean, it's very hard to do.
Yeah, I think she actually is really good in the movie, and I was kind of disappointed when I looked at her, filmography, and I found out that she kind of stopped acting. It's like, that's too bad, because she was really good in this movie. Like, she could have been like another, like doing like Jodie Foster type stuff or something, because I definitely thought of Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver just a little bit as far as a child in a role like that.
Right. You know what? That's a good example of a film that does some of the same things but handles it much differently. Maybe one day we'll get around to doing that one, but good side point. And
again, I do like her performance, and her performance does kind of play into the comedy of it, which is that she is way too young to realize that she is the victim. Like, it's like she doesn't. It's like she's in the ocean in the movie Jaws, and she isn't afraid of sharks or something. Or it's like she doesn't realize what kind of danger she's in. She's as casual about this relationship as James Mason is, at least until the time jump when she's a little bit wiser and older. 18 years old, she kind of snaps out of it a little bit. But some of the scenes of where what James Mason is doing is so horrific, where he's doing things that it's like he needs to go to jail for the rest of his life for some of the stuff he's doing, and she is totally oblivious to the fact that he's doing it, what's going on in his head.
See, I think that's the scary part of this, is that she never really knows how sick he is, right? And maybe she's not, because she's a child still, or at least has a child's mind in a burgeoning woman's body. She doesn't have any way of comprehending how sick this is, right? Because I mean, the attention is intoxicating for her, and which is why she plays up some of it the way she does. And I mean, you know, the famous scenes with the lollipops and the straws and all that. How many times have you seen that replayed, by the way? I mean, holy cow, you now know where it all comes from is this. And she plays seductress really well, but part of me is like, it's a kid not realizing how deep they're in this thing. Like, do you remember Scorsese's remake of Cape Fear and Juliette Lewis and Robert De Niro and some of the really uncomfortable shit they get into?
Oh it's pretty similar. Yeah.
I was thinking like, holy cow! It's like I bet Marty made him watch this and said, just do that, and then the two of them being who they are just did it. And I mean, it really plays off a lot of the same way. It's very much like Juliette Lewis and Robert De Niro from more modern cinematic mind like mine. But to watch this here, and I'm trying to put myself in 1962, Kurt. I mean, Kennedy was about to be murdered, but we had things going on in this country, but this was not the kind of thing you talked about in public. We weren't at the sexual revolution yet, and all this. So this would have blown people's minds in a theater. I can only imagine this just blew people away.
Oh, yeah, certainly like, an American film, a Hollywood film, the guy who just did Spartacus, like a guy like James Mason, Peter Sellers, like these are movie stars. Like the people who made this is such a Hollywood production, and yet the end result is like nothing like Hollywood was making, at least then.
No, not at all. And I mean, you talk about the stars. I mean, you've got Shelley Winters here, who's a major motion picture star for decades. And this is about 10 years before like the defining role of her career in Poseidon Adventure. But still, somebody who you think Shelley Winters, that's a star. Peter Sellers, who had been on, people knew who he was at this time. And then you look down the list. I mean, you got even Lois Maxwell from the old James Bond movies popped up in this thing, and I was like, Moneypenny, please save this awful thing, So, but then you've got James Mason again. It all centers around him as this likable, just sort of like, I'm a pedophile. It just is what it is. But he never explains himself. Like you say, like he never goes through this is why I'm this way, or this is what I like, or whatever. And to me, you just called this a horror show. I think this makes this absolutely a horror show because he never explains himself. I mean, that's the problem with so many good thrillers, right? Is that once they explain it to you, it's like, or maybe that was okay, or maybe that was good, but it always unravels a little too much, right? Never knowing and never seeing, just seeing the results of what this guy did and what these lifestyle choices lead him to is so unnerving. Yeah,
it's like they don't have. I think it's been a while. I made sure to make my notes as detailed as possible, so I don't have to actually rewatch the movie. But as I recall, there's only like one or two moments of voiceover narration. Did he not narrate the scene where he's thinking about pulling a gun on Shelley Winters?
Yeah, like but he talks about how he can't do it. Like I can't kill her. Even though I probably should or whatever. Yeah.
It was like that. We can get explained, but the rest of the movie, it's like. It's
like Nigel said in Spinal Tap. Some things are best left not known. Just let it go. and I'm with him. I don't want him to. I want to make this clear. I don't want him to explain. I don't think thematically it makes any difference that he explains himself, because is it going to make that more acceptable? Like if the bad guy in a war movie explains to you the supposedly bad guy in the war movie explains to you his point of view, you at least get where he's coming from. Maybe you don't agree with it, but you know where he's coming from, right? Like, think back to Paths of Glory. Like, we knew exactly where those upperly mobile generals were coming from, right? Like, them explaining it doesn't change any of that. I mean, it just gives you, okay, well, now I know your motivation. You're just looking out for your own. That's just how you are. But and that doesn't. But it doesn't make what they do any less horrific. And the same here. Had he explained it all away in some way, would it have made any of it more tolerable?
I think it's the lack of explanation. It's a realistic depiction of the sickness, because people who are like this, they too probably don't think anything of it. They don't think it's it's something they don't think it's something to be ashamed of. They don't think it's something that's a problem, and that's at least that's the way it seems. James Mason is playing it, like he doesn't think it's a problem. Although little by little cracks do start to form, like the fact that he wants to leave for Mexico after the neighbors start inquiring about the conversations he's having with his stepdaughter. That does show little by little that
Well, he keeps talking about her, and he keeps talking about how beautiful she is, and just like he says that so many times that the neighbors get suspicious. Like, you're really like that's getting to be a little uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing about this is everything Humbert does. Everything that he does is so he can try to be closer to Lolita, so he can have this relationship with her, right? And let's just talk about him and Charlotte, Shelley Winters, the put upon stepmother here or whatever. Yeah. What a sad woman. Shelley really is a great performance. It's not much of a role. Once again, the women get the short shrift in the Kubrick film. Theme, rinse, repeat. But she really does a lot with it. She may have the best performance next to Lyons in the whole film. I really feel for her. Like, it's sad when she runs out in the rain and gets killed, Great Gatsby style. I mean, really, that's actually what I was thinking of, and not The Devil's Rejects. Thank goodness when this happened. But that's very much the same kind of thing. I think that's the thematic element too that our author was going for, and that I think that's something that Kubrick wanted to make sure he had from Nabokov's novel in the film, that she meets a tragic end because of this guy's selfish choices. Even though he's honest with her about it, that doesn't make it any better.
Oh yeah, it starts off as like a comically kind of sad, the way she's like she won't stop hitting on him to the point, and clearly James Mason wants nothing to do with her. It starts off as kind of funny because she's the she's the horny widow who's attracted to James Mason because she it's the idea that someone is attracted to this character when you know what's going on in his head.
But I can see it, though. I mean, think about it from her perspective. This is a well-to-do, well-adjusted Renaissance man. I mean, he's a French teacher. He speaks a foreign language. That's romantic. Yeah. He's not bad-looking. And, I mean, at this point in her life, she's not going to be choosy, right? He's pretty good compared to what else may be hanging around in the town, right? So I can see why she's attracted to him. The fact is that when she learns what he's all about, it drives her mad.
Yeah, that bit... that's when it kind of that moment where he reads his diary, which is like, dude, why would you leave that in anywhere where someone could read it, where the mother could read it? It's like,
I have a theory about that he needed some way to start that conversation. And how on earth else could you start that, right? So maybe this was his way of starting that conversation. The fact that Kubrick does such a good, it is a good shot. The way it's you're supposed to pay attention to, like, that matters. And then she sits there and pores over it, and the looks on her face, like, I get it. That would be his way of doing it. Like, I've had friends in my life, Kurt, that, like, when they would break up with someone, they can never just come straight out and say, "Look, I don't want to date you anymore." They would always come up with some like elaborate way to pick a fight. So then they could get it out in the midst of the heat, right? And I think that's exactly what Humbert's doing here too. He's like, how on earth can I bring this up to this woman? I'll just kind of leave this out, and she's nosy enough, she'll bumble across it, and then the cat will be out of the bag. And
when she does realize it, it does get scary. But I do like how throughout the first act of the movie, how she, again, much like Lolita herself, that Shelley Winters is oblivious to the idea that this guy's attracted to, her daughter. Like, there's like the bit where they're at the movies, and Shelley Winters can't see that he's holding her hand and her daughter's hand, stuff like that. Or the bit where one of my favorite James Mason bits of acting in the movie is where he's all set to go. Lolita is off to summer camp. Probably not going to see her, because he's only staying in this house for like the summer until he gets this job. He can move someplace else. And he says goodbye to Lolita. He kind of, if you didn't know that, if you look at the time, you see that there's 2 hours left, but you might be thinking, okay, it's like he's gotten this out of his system. It's over. He's going to move on with his life. He's going to get with a woman his own age. He's going to carry on. And it does look like it's over. Then he gets the note from Shelley Winters saying, well, it's something along the lines of, if you leave, fine, but if you stay, I want you to marry me. And he starts laughing as he's reading the note. And this is where the queasiness started to kick in, because at first I was thinking, oh, he's laughing at the idea that, like, he's laughing in a charming way. Oh, she's so attracted to me. And then it occurred to me, oh, he's not laughing because of these affections. He's laughing because how did I not think of this? Exactly. It's like I just found the perfect in to stay next to Lolita. And he starts laughing, and it's so disgusting. And then because it's like he's laughing as though, it's like he's about to pull a heist, and he just found out what the combination to the safe is or something.
Yeah, it's like diabolical in some ways.
Oh, yeah.
Like the laughter really goes into the, oh, I love it when a good plan comes together. I mean, that's exactly what it feels like. And I'm like, oh, you sick bastard. I'm sitting there revolting against this film the whole time, and I'm going, but isn't that the point? And it dawned on me watching this, because I got to admit, I made it through it one time, Kurt, and then I caught some clips, later on to refresh myself, because I couldn't just rewatch the whole thing again. But it dawned on me. I said, I think that's the point. I think Kubrick wanted to take something that was disgusting. Let's just say it is. And then he wanted to present it to us in a way that made us go, holy cow, that's really disgusting. And how disgusting can it be? But also, why isn't it more violent or overt? It's all kind of subtle, and that makes it even more disgusting and scary. I think that's the point.
Oh yeah, I think Kubrick, he knew that. And again, I haven't read the book, but the way Kubrick presents this, he's presenting it's like he's making a horror movie, a psychological thriller, but instead of making it like Dracula or making it like a monster movie, he's going to make it like it's like I was going to say a drama. He doesn't make it like a drama. He makes it like.
Well, it's a dramedy, actually, because there's comedy we haven't gotten to yet with this Quilty guy. But that's the other part, is when he starts introducing the laughs. That's when it gets really uncomfortable.
It's like it gets funny, and it gets more disgusting because. I'm laughing at something, and then I'm realizing, did I just laugh at that kind of a scene? Like, because if this scene happened,
not laugh at Peter Sellers going, and the libido, and he's just going on, and it's like, it's like you feel like you're in 8th grade again, giggling at sex ed, but that's exactly how uncomfortable and weird and funny it all supposed to come off. That's the part that got me, is I was like, I laughed at it, and then I felt really bad about it.
Oh yeah, it's exactly like, this is something Roger Ebert said. He was talking about the movie Naked Gun, which obviously a whole different ballgame. But he talked.
I didn't think we'd be referencing that today.
Yeah, but what he said is he would laugh twice at every joke. He would laugh because he thought it was funny, and then he would laugh, going, I can't believe I just laughed at something that's silly, and that's similar to that's the way I laughed during this movie, where it actually reminds me a little bit of the movie Goodfellas, where I'm laughing all throughout Goodfellas, but the laughs get blurred, where I forget, am I laughing because this is funny, or am I laughing out of nervous tension? And that's similar to Lolita, where it's like, I can't tell if I'm laughing because that was funny, or it was just so audacious, and I'm laughing at the attempt to make it funny. And it's like, and all this swirling around in my head with the disgusting material, it just makes it like, we haven't talked about the fact the movie is 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
So it's so you're just in that mode that stuff in your stomach is just there for so much longer, which makes it even more twisted.
That's the thing, is Kubrick is going to make you, and I'll say this again, this is what Rob Zombie loves to do, is he loves to rub your face in it for as long as he possibly can. And I think Kubrick's the same way. He's like, oh, I've got you here now, so now I'm going to make you not only eat this, but you're going to eat a second helping of it.
Yeah.
And you're gonna feel really bad about it, because you're gonna go, I really don't want any more of that, but then you're gonna eat it anyway, because I'm telling you have to. And that just goes on and on and on. And I'm sitting there again watching this, and I'm thoroughly unnerved the entire time. And I'm the horror buff, right? So like this shouldn't, there should be nothing that can, get to me anymore, right? I'm a desensitized horror film fan, but this is one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever watched. By far. And it's not only to the subject matter, and I want to get past that. It is the way that they play it and the way that they don't show you everything. It'd be one thing, and this is one thing the 1997 movie really gets into, is the way Jeremy Irons and Dominic Swain just all over him and stuff like that. They can't do that here, right? But they do just enough to make you complete the sentence in your own head. And I think that's even more disturbing.
Yeah, it's kind of like when we were talking about Seven. Like, it's not a violent movie, but when that movie is over, you've pictured more violent things than you've ever seen in any movie.
Exactly.
And this movie, it's like, like I've seen a lot of twisted movies dealing with violence or sexual perversity. Like, there's a movie called Compliance.
I've seen that movie. Yes, yeah.
And it's I actually think it's a very good movie. It's very well made. It deals with
based on a true story too. So
based on a very disturbing true story, and it's a very disturbing movie. And when it's over, I'm as disturbing as it is. I am just kind of like, well, that was very disturbing. That was and it was good, but it was very disturbing, and I did not enjoy that, but it was very good. But with Lolita, I'm laughing in a movie where that stuff is going on. So I'm like, it's so guilty. Like, I'm enjoying myself during this kind of movie. And it's like, that shouldn't be. It's like, it's again, much similar to Goodfellas. Like, I'm laughing my ass off, and these guys are, shoving ice picks into the back of guys' heads like that. And yet they're making jokes, 2 seconds later, like I might as well let this guy drive, stuff like that.
Well, see, and here's another thing, and I don't know if Kubrick was going for this or not, but it's a good enough time to bring this discussion up. There's always this uncomfortable line of how far can you go in a movie with American cinema, right? And like violence and sex mixed together used to equal X rating all the way, especially if you were an independent, right? If you had a big studio, you might get them to bump it down to R because, think of like the original Death Wish and the assault scene in that. It's incredibly graphic. Any other company makes that movie and that's an X and nobody knows about that. It's some underground legend. But Charles Bronson's in it and it's a major motion picture, so they let it slide, right? And American audiences, and particularly like the MPAA, always have this thing about like you can have all the sex you want, but you got to tone down the violence, or you can have all the violence you want, but you can't mix it with sex. Like there's always this sliding scale to it. And I wonder if Kubrick is not going, I just did this, battle movie where we killed thousands of people and nobody blinked an eye about any of it. And I crucified half the cast and nobody said anything and all this stuff. And he said, so maybe I'm going to just show you like, well, okay, we're not going to have a violent movie. We're going to have a movie where pedophilia goes on and she doesn't like have to hit him in the face and be, coerced to it. She goes along with it. Because that's the thing that happens in the second act that turns is they have a romantic relationship, a legitimate romantic relationship, Kurt. And that is the part where I'm like, okay, I see now what you've done, Stanley. You wanted me to laugh at this and feel bad about it. And now you want to show me how much of a bad person I am. And I get it. I am. And these people are horrible and I want them all to die. So that is what is happening.
That is true, because it's like there's a lot of laughs in the first half of the movie, but pretty much like from the moment they decide to go to Mexico, the laughs they do dry up. Aside from one scene that I think is unintentionally, but intentionally funny. But yeah, once this movie, because the first half of the movie, it's like a couple tweaks. This is like it's like a sitcom plot or something like. A couple tweaks, you maybe could get this on TV as a comedy of like, because there's been movies made about the older guy and the younger girl, but
think about The Crush with Carrie Elways and Alicia Silverstone when she was a teenager. In that one, she's the aggressor, and it's like Fatal Attraction with the teenagers, what that movie turns out to be. But a lot of it, especially the first act, plays a lot like Lolita, and that's not a mistake. That was done on purpose.
Oh yeah, and when this movie does make that turn, and it's like you're embedded in this kind of very twisted comedy, and when it suddenly does make the turn of when James Mason does start to, he loses the charm a little bit and starts to, like, the first chunk of the movie, he's wearing, 3-piece suits. But I just, when I think of the scene of like him in the hospital, he's wearing like this, some kind of like, down jacket. And he's starting to look more and more like a nut job. And he's starting to get a little bit like sweaty and disheveled.
Right.
And it's like, he's the sort of the more the image we might have of a pedophile, not what he is in the first movie, the completely well-to-do. Because that's the thing. Like, when the movie starts, you might be on his side and think, oh, he's just kind of, he'll snap out of it. And then an hour and a half goes by. It's like, okay, he's going to snap out of it, right? And he doesn't. And the movie ends, like, jumping ahead.
Yeah.
We find out this guy dies in prison, and he probably still never snapped out of it. He never realized.
Still obsessed with this girl. You can
Exactly.
tell. Like, even though she's thrown him off and he's gone and killed, her other suitor, if you will, now, in some sort of twisted revenge. I mean, it's like he had nothing else to live for, so he might as well throw his life away. And I think that's exactly what he does. We got to talk about Quilty like in detail here, though, because we've talked about the Sellers performance, and I told you it was sort of a riff on Freud, I think. I don't have anything to prove that. I'm just telling you that's how I read it. But I'm assuming he's a part of this unintentionally funny scene that you were referencing a minute ago.
Well, no, he's not. That the scene, the unintentionally funny scene is where the breakup scene where where Humbert does come clean finally.
Yeah, because it is. I think part of that is 1960s acting and hysterics, and that's just what Shelley Winters went for. It's kind of insane. So.
Oh yeah, but I'm talking more about where he breaks it off with at the very end where he's crying, and about that scene I gotta say that is because again at this point in the movie, let's say it's been like 30-40 minutes without a laugh, but that scene where she's saying I finally kind of get it that you're a monster, or I don't even know if she goes that far. She it's almost like she still has not clicked, but she does break it off. She does. I think she does say like, you did use me, or she realizes.
Oh, you're talking about Lolita breaking it off then. Okay. That makes more sense. I didn't know. I don't know that I read that as funny. I could see how you'd say that, but I didn't catch it as that. But that's funny. So that you saw it that way.
Here's what makes that funny to me was that again, the idea that Mason does not get it is that he's so emotional, like as though his life is over because this teenager is breaking up with him. And it's like, you want him, like, even in this moment where he's a monster, you do want to say like, dude, you can like, it's not over. Like, you're 49, just find a woman your own age or something. But what made that scene so funny to me was the score. The rest of the music wasn't exactly like this, but the music, it was so heartstrings tugging, sappy, raw, like you would have in a super sappy love story. And what it reminded me of was stuff you would hear in a Warner Brothers cartoon, where a scene is supposed to be funny because a character is crying. Like I think of the one where Bugs Bunny is with the penguin, and every time Bugs tries to leave the penguin starts crying, and we get that almost exact same heartstrings violin music, and that was playing during this scene where really this is a positive moment. This is like, finally, this like those girls found a way to get out of the clutches of this animal, and yet the scene is being played of, it's so sad and tragic that this love story is over. And it's again like the movie is still playing itself as this love story or a romance. I just found that I couldn't tell if that was. I thought that was Kubrick mocking that kind of scene, mocking that kind of heartstrings moment by having this monster break down into tears like that.
I think you're right on. I think that's exactly what he's doing. He is mocking the absurdity that. Were you really going along with this as a romance, people? Don't you see how pathetic this man is? And that's what Humbert comes off as, and that is pathetic. I'm like, man, if there was any other reason, like, boy, you feel good for Lolita for getting this loser out of her life, and you hope that she's moved on to something better. Even though you also are told she went through more pedophilia. because that's the thing I wanted to ask you about Peter Sellers here. Did you ever get the hint that Quilty was just another pedophile that was sort of following along with this and kind of undermining everything?
Not until the end, because I got to say, Peter Sellers in this movie gives one of my favorite performances in the history of film. I've always been a fan of his. With a few things of his I've seen, I don't know if he was that prolific. He did a lot of stuff, but it's like I particularly like Revenge of the Pink Panther, the one where Herbert Lom is the villain,
Yeah.
and Doctor Strangelove. I'm just a fan of his because I think he might have, like the specific kind of comedy he does. I think he might have been the best at that, and no one's ever topped him. And when he was in this movie, like I said, I thought this was going to be a very straight movie. So I think the first line he says is that he comes up under the blanket, covered in wine bottles, and stands up and he says, "I'm Spartacus." Like, if I'm not mistaken, that's like the first line of the movie.
Yeah, he tries to, and I was like, oh, that's Kubrick's middle finger to his previous film that he hated. So.
Yeah, but I thought that was awesome. Like Kubrick is okay doing references to his own movies, like jumping ahead to Clockwork Orange. Alex goes to the record store right there at the front where you can see is an album of the soundtrack for 2001. I love that Kubrick, being he is such a dark, twisted kind of guy, but he knows how to,
Well, he's a
cinephile.
Culture. I mean, that's the thing.
Oh, yeah.
And nowadays that kind of self-referentialism is something that we see so many filmmakers do, right? Like we talked about a couple of them here. Zombie does it. Scorsese does it. And Tarantino can't help himself but to do it.
Sure.
12 times, right? So that it may not be like as big a deal nowadays because it gets done so much or whatever. But in these days, like again, amongst cinema folks and stuff who were really starting to figure out, hey, is this Kubrick guy for real or not? This would have been the kind of thing that they got off on, that they liked, which is interesting because this is a movie that's so disturbing otherwise. The only thing you can try to praise is, well, it's made really well. It's the best pedophile film ever made. That's all you can say. I mean, it's hard to praise this thing because the subject matter is so dark.
Oh, yeah. But about Peter Sellers, like he kicks off the movie with the comedy, and again, I was so not ready for laughs, and all of a sudden, everything he was saying, he was playing this drunk rich guy in this mansion. Everything he was saying was making me laugh, trying to play ping pong with this guy, and just random bit, like all of a sudden he reaches into his pocket, pulls out 5 balls at once, and tosses them at him. Just random stuff like that, and I got to wonder if that's Peter Sellers being let loose or if Kubrick thought of that. Whatever it is, I was like, man, this guy's funny.
He is very funny in it. You're right. And if it weren't for the fact of the dark turn his character takes, it'd be my favorite performance in the film. I give that to Lion and Winters kind of in a co-bit because I think they do well with what they've got there. Sellers, though, and I think maybe that's the subversive nature of the Sellers character, is that you just expect him to be this eccentric kind of weirdo, or maybe he's a police officer because that's kind of what he plays himself off as, but he's really not. He's just another creep. But he's got a much more, he's even more sinister than Humbert is.
Oh yeah, he doesn't have that much screen time per se, but it's one of those characters. It's almost like Kaiser Soze, where when you watch it again, you realize there is so much happening if you look at the movie from this character's POV. And I love the way the movie starts with him. I think it's just a brilliant way to start movies. Start a movie with a man killing another man, and over the course of the movie, without telling them specifically why he killed him, but over the course of the movie, you start to find out why this guy killed him, or you start to wonder. It's like, so what is this guy going to do that would drive James Mason to murder? Like a very classic kind of mystery filmmaking.
It's a noir thing, right? And I mean, we talked about Kubrick's first films were all noir, right? And so obviously he's going back to that too, because again, he wanted to get away from that big studio picture that he had done. So he went back to roots. I mean, he went back to The Killing. And it would be like if The Killing started with the scene at the airport at the end where Sterling Hayden goes, "What's the difference?" And then you figure out what it leads up to. Like there's your fan edit. Do that. That would be kind of fun to see. How that film would roll out, knowing how it ends like that. I took that as what it was. I mean, I kind of like the little noir nod in it again, but again, I lose myself in saying, "Oh, that's kind of cool," but then I'm like, "But this is a movie about pedophiles, and I have to hate it." You know, like I just keep coming back to that, and I can't get over that. Maybe that's my own fault, but even cinematically, though, is there anything like just greatly interesting? I mean, I talked a little bit about the way he shot that whole scene with the journal and all that kind of stuff, but there's nothing really just, I don't know, grand about the way this looks.
Yeah, not really. Kubrick hadn't gotten into that yet. He hadn't gotten into the, spectacular visuals. He was still doing stuff that focused more on character. And then, 2 movies later, he jumps to 2001 where, he could care less about characters, but let's just make this look as cool as possible. And yeah, it's not particularly, nothing about the visuals stand out. It's more about the performances and the characters he's focusing on this time.
And I think that's a good point to wrap up the show here and give final thoughts and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for Lolita, Kurt?
Like I said, I skipped this movie for the longest time, and I really regret it because I saw The Room, I saw Troll 2, I saw Showgirls before crossing off my last Kubrick movie. And I thought I had this movie pegged as it was going to be a creepy drama or a thriller that I'd watch, and then I forgot this is a Stanley Kubrick movie. And as disturbing as it was, I have to say I had such a blast watching it. I've never had so much fun being so intensely creeped out. Like, not just kind of sort of creeped out. Like, it's not like American Beauty, that relationship, which is, kind of sort of acceptable and it ends in a very positive way where the, Spacey kind of he snaps out of it. But in this movie, James Mason, again, this character literally goes to his grave and he'd probably tell you, I don't know, he didn't think he did anything untoward. But I was legitimately queasy from that moment where James Mason went out of his way to ogle this 14-year-old girl. And at the same time, I laughed out loud more during this scene than during actual comedies, like the psychiatrist scene where Peter Sellers, in the prototype of the Doctor Strangelove character, he's reading off like, I've been studying, which is really disturbing. He's like, I've been studying this girl. Later on, you find out that that's way more insidious than you thought. Mm-hmm. And he just says, and she sighs a lot. She just kind of goes, and just as he was doing it, I was laughing so hard. I was like missing dialogue, and I had to rewind the movie. And again, like I was saying with Naked Gun, it's like I would laugh, and then I would question myself. It's like, I can't believe I laughed at something so insidious, something so disturbing. And Kubrick took what on paper is a very depressing story and somehow made it hilarious. I think James Mason gives a performance for the books, amping the creep factor up to 1,000,000. I mean, Hannibal Lecter is a character we literally see rip people's face off and try to eat them, and he's not as creepy as James Mason in this movie. And Peter Sellers turns in one of my all-time personal favorite supporting performances in any movie. I laughed at pretty much every word that came out of his mouth. And what I thought would be an okay movie, maybe just a movie to be like, okay, let's just cross it off so I can say I saw it. This actually has ended up being one of my favorite Stanley Kubrick movies. However, I don't know if I'll ever feel like watching it again. But I give it an extra large popcorn.
I agree with everything you just said in review. All right, the performances take this beyond the pale of what it could have been. Right, the camera work, that's kind of here or there, but the performances work in a very difficult setting and stuff. But because I can't imagine any scenario in which I would want to rewatch this, I cannot in my review style tell anybody else you should ever see it either. Like, I think it's one of those things that might be best digested if you're around a group of friends that want to, talk about film and things like that, or maybe even want to talk about the difficult subject of pedophilia. It might be something like from an academic perspective, I could see myself watching again or someone else watching, but I can't recommend it as a form of entertainment, like at all. 'Cause I can't ever tell you I was really entertained by this. And maybe that's just my own personal point of view with the subject matter and stuff, but I could never find myself entertained, even when I think I was supposed to be. Like, there's parts of this movie where clearly Kubrick wants me to laugh at that. It's funny. I'm supposed to laugh at that, but I can't. because I know what's underneath it. And I think you made a great word there about how insidious all of the quilty observations of Lolita are. And when you find out what becomes of that, and you're like, oh, that's why he was just a stalker. That's really uncomfortable now. It does change the way you see the film. That said, I'll give it credit in this area. I was never bored with it. It's 2.5 hours of it. It's a slog to get through, but I was never bored, just more as I was like, how much longer do I have to sit in here? You know, it's kind of like being in traction, if you've ever done that at the chiropractor's office. Like, it's helpful, but I don't know how much longer I can stand it. You know, or maybe being in a sauna. I don't know. You know, you pick your poison, but I don't know how much longer I can live with it. Or I'll give you a better one, Kurt. I used to run half marathons with my wife, and great exercise. More power to you if that's your cup of tea. But every time I was running one of those, which is 13 miles and some change, somewhere around mile 6, I would begin to ask myself, why am I doing this to myself? Like, half of it, like, I found like half that amount was fine for me. It's a great run, great exercise, you know. But like something that's going to take me 2 hours to do, or 2.5 hours to do, I question my will to complete it or live or anything else. And I kind of feel the same way about this movie. So I can't give it anything higher than a small popcorn. I have to trash it because it's the worst. It is the worst one I've seen so far. And I know what's coming. All right, I know what's coming up in the filmography, and I don't think I'm going to be as turned off as I was to this. Like, I just something about this one I just cannot let go of, and so I'm going to go the complete opposite direction of you and give it the lowest of ratings, and just I'm glad to put it out of my mind too, because I never want to come back to it. Thankfully, we get to go to something that's much more. I think it'll bring a much different kind of discussion when we get around to talking about Dr. Strangelove. But that is much lighter topic. The end of the world. Yeah. Who knew that would be that way? But yes. And then nuclear holocaust. Hey, you know, sometimes it takes films like Lolita to make that subject matter more attainable. Maybe that was the gateway drug. Yeah, let's look at it that way. But you know, until then, Kurt, we got a lot of other things coming up. I mean, we're getting near the end of 2017 here. We've got a lot of stuff on the feed right now. You came back with a great review of Blade Runner 2049. So hoping to get more of those Fabish Factor reviews out of you, and then of course we'll have you back to do this. But probably our next stop along the way, man, we're going to be talking some Star Wars, and there's a lot of I watched the trailer once, my man, and I'm telling you, I'm like, okay, I don't want to see any more because this looks like it's going to be amazing. Oh yeah, I made sure to not watch the trailer because I mean the last trailer and just the fact Star Wars movie, it's like they got my $20 for the IMAX ticket. They sold it when they said they're making a movie called Star Wars Episode 8. But yeah, I can't wait to see that. Oh, yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, more stuff coming out on the feed. Subscribe, folks. Continuous Play Podcast /Filmstrip on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. And leave us a review. If you like the show, please leave us a review. It helps other people find the show. We appreciate your support. And as always, thank you for tuning in. For Kurt, I'm Jay. Thanks for listening to Filmstrip.
Thank you for listening to Filmstrip. You can find more episodes on our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. Please leave us a positive review on iTunes and link up with us on Facebook. The Filmstrip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121.